If you're a part of Generation Z, like me, you are likely to spend 37.5% of your life on some kind of screen. To break this down, after looking at a plethora of studies done and presented by professionals from Mind Behaviors, Harmony Healthcare, and a few others, majority of surveys show that Gen Zers have an average of 9 hours of recreational screen time per day. That adds up quickly, bringing you to around 137 days in a year, which is 37.5%. Then, as the average lifespan of the American citizen, according to Data Commons, is around 78 years, the average Gen Z person would spend just over 29 years on a device. As shocking as this information is, the bigger concern is the effect this amount of screen time has on developing brains, meaning ages 0 to 25, as that's when the brain is formed from start to finish. The debate between children and parents over screen time has been going on since early 1900s when the televisions were first created. However, on June 29, 2007, the day Apple released their first iPhone, that argument would change for the rest of time. All of a sudden, everything imaginable was in the palm of your hand, literally. But at what cost? Steve Jobs, an integral part of this release as the co-founder of Apple, did not allow his children to have an iPhone or use most, if any, of the technology he created. If this creator of the device did not allow his family to use them until the day he died, what does this say about his creation? Jobs died in 2012, still not allowing his family to use digital technology, as he found it to be harmful if overconsumed, as well as addictive. Quite the complementary pair. This should raise a lot of questions as to what parents are allowing themselves and their children to consume, and how much is okay before it begins to be harmful. However, this information is not talked about often, so how are consumers supposed to know? While Jobs could just be seen as an overprotective parent, he's not, as seen by other inventors not allowing their children to use inventions, like Bill Gates. Gates is a creator and co-founder of Microsoft, as well as many other online sites. Gates also did not allow his children to have any screen time until well into their teen years. Furthermore, his children were not allowed more than 45 minutes a week of screen time, unless it was a special occasion for which he would allow 1 full hour. Another example is Mark Zuckerberg, co-founder of Facebook, who also does not allow his young children on social media, nor has he given them any devices. These are 3 men who have had a substantial effect on technology as we know it, who are not allowing their children or family members to be sucked into the algorithm they know to be harmful because they're the ones who made it so. As shown by their actions, screens can be harmful and dangerous and highly addictive. And while my words are usually associated with physical consequences, you might be thinking I'm really dramatic. But what if I'm not? Scientifically, too much screen time legitimately alters a person's brain, especially when said person's brain is not fully developed. According to a study done at Mayo Clinic, the human brain does not fully develop until the age of 25 when the frontal lobe is finally finished. Furthermore, 25 is the minimum age for when the person's brain can develop. This frontal lobe is responsible for higher level cognitive functions, such as decision-making, problem-solving, reasoning, judgment, emotional regulation, and many more things of that sort. This being said, a person should be wary of the decisions they're making, as some technological ones could lead to permanent brain altercations. But why does this matter if it's been happening for generations now and the world continues to spin? This issue is to be held in a serious light, as a study conducted at Cincinnati's Children's Hospital showed that children with a higher screen time have lower brain white matter quality, which affects the myelin formation. Myelin is what covers nerve fibers of the brain's white matter, allowing nerve impulses to move quickly in tracks that send the brain messages. So essentially, when younger children have access to screens, their brains are being polluted and slowed down. This study also proved that higher the screen time, the lower the cognitive functions. And when talking about the toddlers who had been growing up with little to no screen restrictions, researchers found, quote, they had significantly lower expressive language, being defined as how a person expresses their thoughts and feelings, end quote. With each new development, each generation is being more and more poisoned, dumbed down, and then being blamed for it by being labeled as a lazy generation. With these facts continuing to come out, the question rises, what should we do? First, Screen time should become a genuine conversation instead of a frivolous argument between children and their parents. With how the world has progressed, we'll never be able to fully be off the grid. However, being off screens is a lot easier than you may imagine. While screens have now become necessary for things like school or work, there's so much time wasted on screens that could be spent doing quite literally anything else. On the contrary, simply being still and moving slow is becoming a lost art, especially because humans were not made for this digitally induced, fast-paced, always consuming lifestyle. We should put limitations on what is harmful so we're able to do the things that truly matter. Concerning the issue of whether screen time for children should continue the way it is, we must consider the physical, societal, and psychological effects that will inevitably take place. When God created man, he created us in a specific way, delicately and intricately to be exactly who he needs us to be, including our brains. We are made in his image, and with that comes the creativity and dreams for inventions. However, because of sin, these inventions that are able to be God-honoring are also able to become a slippery slope toward a nearly countless amount of issues. Unfortunately, technology like iPhones, iPads, computers, etc., and the way they are used has rapidly come to that fine line between being edifying and corrupting our brains. With each new development, screens become more and more addictive. Too much time on screens, especially for developing brains, can cause physical damage. The first effect seen in children who spent too much time on their screens is their stunted cognitive thinking. As mentioned earlier, a study conducted at the Cincinnati Children's Hospital Medical Center showed researchers that children between the ages of 3 and 5 who had more screen time had less white matter in their brains. This caused a 5% lower cognitive function than their peers also under review. This shows that children who have more screen time than the recommended up to 1 hour per day for children of that age have less white matter in their brains, which is directly connected to their myelin production. As a quick reminder, myelin is the fatty substance that covers the nerve fibers of white matter in the brain, allowing them to send impulses to the brain. A lack of this causes self-control to be an even more difficult task for children than it already is. Furthermore, this lowers their cognitive functions as a whole, meaning they have shorter attention spans, difficulty recalling things in their memory, understanding language, thinking, learning, and more. The increased technology impedes on the time children could have spent reading, which is not only just an argument between kids and their parents or teachers, but is leading to brain altercations in some kids with high enough screen time. C.P. Horowitz-Krauss, scientific director of the Reading and Literacy Discovery Center in the Cincinnati Children's Hospital, administered a study for children who spent more time reading versus children who spent more time on their devices to see how their brains were developing. She reported that, quote, "The longer the screen exposure time is, the less coordinated the brain area responsible for reading words is with areas related to vision, language, and concentration," end quote. Her study proved that with increasing screen time, there comes increasing dyslexia and difficulties concentrating. The part of the brain that is accountable for words as well as vision and other developing parts is being infiltrated by the part of the brain that feeds off being on a screen. Once screen time goes over the limit that's healthy for the brain, it starts to want more and more, which is why excessive screen time cannot coexist with other parts of the brain. Not only can the functions of the brain be altered, but when the limit is exceeded, screen time can actually change the shape of our brains. Throughout puberty, the cortex goes through some changes as it adapts with our body. God designed it so perfectly aligned with our bodies, but too much screen time actually tampers with that. Teens who use screen time for over 7 hours daily have a thinner cortex than those who use it less. This may seem like a reach because this applies to kids who have screen time for over 7 hours. However, according to the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, quote, "Teens spend up to 9 hours on a screen daily." Not only does this reach the 7-hour marker, but it exceeds it. However, this specific study is for teens, not like the young children we were talking about earlier. So it's easy to say these teenagers are irresponsible or crazy for spending that amount of time on a phone, or watching television, or on their computer. But what we need to do is look at their history with screens, because if they were allowed more than 1 hour of screen time a day before 5 years old, they are more susceptible to have an urge or even an addiction to screen time by the time they're in their teens. So this is a serious disease that cannot be counted off as laziness. When we're allowing so much time to be spent on technology, whether we notice the effects or not, they take place. This means that these younger generations, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, most recently Generation Beta, are being raised on brain-altering tech. This has inevitable consequences, both big and small, but one notable one being the societal decline. As a result of some of these societal changes, what we are facing more are health issues across the board, as physical activities are being replaced with online ones. According to professionals at Mayo Clinic, too much screen time is linked to the following: eye strain, blurred vision, eye pain, neck pain, shoulder pain, poor posture, lower back pain, headaches, and a lot more, as well as weight gain, which is due to less physical activity and sleep loss. And while most of us are probably guilty of watching one too many TV show episodes before bed or scrolling on social media before we fall asleep, it's a smaller scale version of what I'm targeting at this time. When we are spending more times on our phone than we are collectively doing something productive, that's when it gets dangerous. Like getting daily activity. It's no longer in the norm for a lot of people in today's society, but checking our phone first thing in the morning is. This sets the tone for our day to be screen-focused, checking our phones on lunch breaks, in between classes, as soon as we get out of meetings, instead of doing anything else. When there's 5 minutes to kill, we'll check our phone instead of comfortably sitting in silence or striking up a conversation with somebody. As online personas grow, online friendships have begun to replace real ones. Kids have friends on their social media apps, their gaming apps, streaming services, and according to Pew Research Center, 57% of kids have online friends. These relationships, while they're not inherently bad, are causing more harm than good. Aside from the many dangers of online relationships, these connections are not face-to-face, which stunts the child's ability to understand social cues, facial expressions, curate timely responses, hold eye contact, or read body language. This hurts the child, who will grow up unknowing a lot of this basic communication skills needed for them to fill their full potential. As more and more kids are being introduced to screens at earlier ages, there's also a societal surge in mental health disorders. According to a study done at London's Global University, in the top-ranked university in the UK for research power in psychology, psychiatry, and neuroscience, in the past 20 years, mental disorders in teens have over doubled in numbers. But what causes this, and what's changing? There's been a consistent outflow of new technology devices with new improvements, as well as more people gaining access to them. Not only are there more devices, but there have been more social media platforms than ever, which have been directly linked time and time again to mental health disorders by many professionals. These climbing numbers are not going to stop if we don't do something about the root cause of this issue. But beside concern for those who are suffering, what will this mean for our society? This drastic increase of these disorders, like anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder, and borderline personality disorder, while it's not anybody's fault, it is not good for our future. We need to have a strong generation, giving our future our all and not allowing technology to steal it from us. Not only this, but these disorders also include social anxiety, which has been growing more now than it has ever. This promotes isolation, which we know to never have been beneficial, and even the Bible warns against the dangers of it. Galatians 6:2 says, "Bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ." Ecclesiastes 4:9-12, "For two are better than one, because they have good reward for their labor. If they fall, one will lift his companion up. But woe to him who is alone, for when he falls, he has no one to help him up. Again, if two lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one be warm alone? Though one may be overpowered by another, two can withstand him, and a threefold cord is not broken quickly." These verses are so evident that the Lord calls us to have community with one another, and that isolation and getting lost in your own head is not from him, nor is getting lost in mindless scrolling, because we are here for one another as he is here for us. So we've seen both the physical and societal effects. There's one more spot that I believe to be the most aggressively affected. The psychological impact screen time has on developing brains is astounding. Not only are these just psychological effects, but they do spill over to the other issues previously mentioned. Too much time on social media affects how children behave, think, and feel. The American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry quotes that, on average, children ages 8 to 12 spend 4 to 6 hours a day watching or using screens, while teens spend up to 9. Among teens in a study conducted under the website healthychildren.org, 79% of them say they use social media, and 35% say they would not want to live without it. The longer the screen exposure, the more damage done to cognitive thinking, as we've seen. But now, this goes as far as teens not wanting to live without an app on their phone. As 2 hours is the widely and harshly recommended limit for teenagers, what these 9 hours are doing to us is incredibly crippling. 9 hours. It's an hour more than the average 9-to-5 job. It's an hour more than the average sleep recommendation. So for the average person, they are spending every minute of their free time on their phone and most likely impeding on time they should be sleeping or working. And though this damage being done is drastic, kids are not exactly the ones at fault, as screens are made to be highly addictive just as drugs are. In an author and psychologist, Jonathan Haidt's The Anxious Generation, he does a deep dive into the addictiveness of these modern screens we have, and what he found was incredibly disheartening. Quote, addiction researcher Anna Lembeck says universal symptoms of withdrawal are anxiety, irritability, insomnia, and dysphoria. She and other researchers find many adolescents have developed behavioral addictions that are very much like the way people develop addictions to slot machines, gambling with profound consequences for their well-being, their social development, and their families, end quote. Not only are our phones becoming like gambling addiction, but in Oliver Burkeman's book, he writes that iPhone creators have actually admitted to borrowing designs from real casino slot machines to foster compulsive behavior. Children, who are the most impressionable people on this planet, are being manipulated and becoming accidental addicts to their phones and then being blamed for it. How are these kids supposed to fight the thousands of people behind the screen that are being employed to keep them hooked? To follow the idea that we cannot have just sheer willpower to fight against this actual addiction, too much time on the screen can easily lead to a shift in thinking and in morals. In well-respected British author and journalist Oliver Burkeman's 4,000 Weeks, Time Management for Morals, he talks about the addictive habits formed and holds the same stance as previously stated. He talks about the thousands of people behind the phone trying to keep us hooked on our screen. He says that screen time, quote, influences our sense of what matters and how we allocate our time offline as well, end quote. His book references the reason for screens and how they were designed to systematically distort our reality and the way we view the world. Screen time is just one big persuasive attempt to make us think one way, and we know it works because we're convinced to pick it up every day and waste time on them. Burkeman talks about the intensity and great lengths gone to ensure that we do stay hooked and are therefore more easily swayed when he says, quote, our smartphones are tracking our every move, recording how we swipe and click, what we linger on or scroll past, so the data collected can be used to show us precisely content that will keep us hooked, end quote. Social media and all these websites we use are not the product. We are. Our smartphones are programmed to learn us, to keep us, transform us, and all without us realizing the grip that it holds on us. However, there are many cases that have been conducted showing that, quote, beginning in around 2 years, quality TV, well-designed, age-appropriate, programs with specific educational goals can provide an additional route to early language and literacy for children, end quote. This is a direct quote from the NIH, the National Institution of Health, so it's not to be taken lightly. It's also understandable that if there's a reliable program that can be used to help kids learn, it could lead to quicker learning for an entire generation. However, if this is introduced too early or watched for a minute too long, it can be dangerous with damages that happen quickly but have lasting effects. In that same article published by the NIH, they warn parents that if screens are shown before 12 months old or for too long, there can actually be language delays in children. So while showing these programs can be beneficial, they can all too quickly become just another hurdle kids will have to jump over. The intense effects can also be under the radar for a long time, leading to a longer recovery time. In another study done by the NIH, we learned that, quote, early evidence suggests that interactive media, specifically applications that involve contingent responses from an adult, can help children retain information better, end quote. It can also, quote, teach new words to 24-month-olds, end quote. This is an incredible development for humans, and if proven to be safe, could continue to build on itself and be world-changing. However, this is not exactly promised to be safe. The NIH is also quoted to report that it must be less than 2 hours of screen time, and children must be over 12 months old to even begin to introduce them to this way of learning, as to, quote, not negatively affect their language use and acquisition, attention, cognitive development, and executive function, end quote. This seems like a risky way to introduce new words and help children retain information. And in my opinion, the cons seem to far outweigh the pros. This article also seems to share this opinion as they carefully warn against these possibilities. Screen time used to stimulate the brain is not as harmful how playing video games is. This is another main argument against mine. And a main concern of this argument is contingent on how we use our brains to their full potential, and brain stimulation plays a big role in that. So I would agree. If you're using your brain while you're on your screen, it's not harmful how getting stuck in a brainless doom scroll is. However, this does not mean that it's not harmful at all. Unfortunately, while our brains may be getting the exercise they need, the rest of our bodies are not. This can cause physical maladies throughout the body, one main part being our eyes. While often forgotten nowadays, the 20-20-20 rule is still highly recommended. This is the idea that when you need to look at a screen for a long time, you need to look at something 20 feet away for 20 seconds every 20 minutes. This is because if not, users will more likely than not experience dry, itchy eyes, eye strain and fatigue, vision loss, blurred vision, headaches, neck pain, sensitivity to light, and a lot of other problems. These ideas have been proven through research studies done by Healthy Children Organization. And while we can rationalize while we're using our screens, and we truly do need to use them to function in this society today, our bodies need to meet a certain criteria in order to function at their best. So, we've gone over technology and all its dangers, physically, societally, and psychologically. We've seen that technology can cause physical damages to the brain in ways like altercations and literal changes to the shape. These effects were also shown to leak into our society in many ways, like the breakdown of cognitive thinking, as well as the decline in physical activities and online relationships replacing in-person ones. This all trickles into what we saw as a psychological impact that technology can bring, which is seen in the ways of social media affecting behavior, as well as their thoughts and morals. Moreover, technology was made to be as addictive as a drug would be, leaving many kids to try and hold their own against the brilliance of creators of said technology. 37.5% of your life, somewhere around 29 years. Think of all we could do with that time, and all the memories that could be made. Instead of letting the world impact us, we should impact the world. What if we allow our screens to consume our time? What if we don't change our habits? The world will still spin, but we will waste opportunities to fill our potential. We were created with divine purpose and callings, and to allow technology to consume our time would to be ignore what we were made for. So what do? We choose how we spend our time. We do not allow the screen to dictate our life, but let it become a mere footnote. We begin to get outside. We spend time with our loved ones or start the project we've been putting off for so long. We travel and see the world, or we get more involved in our communities at home. But most important of all, we spend more time with our Creator, allowing Him to use us for the purpose He's crafted us for. Thank you.